So hello and welcome to the Expat Pod. My name is James, your host, and today I'm joined by Molly. And Molly, if you could please share with us where you're from and where you've lived, that'd be great.
Sure thing. So I currently live in Costa Rica, but I am originally from Washington, D.C.
Great. We can go into the podcast. So welcome to section 1 of the podcast about getting there. So Molly, this is where I kind of ask my guests a bit of the kind of background as to, well, first of all, the why they wanted to live abroad and also the how. So if we start with the why, so what was your kind of inspiration for wanting to move and live in Costa Rica or anywhere in particular?
Well, to be honest, it was kind of a combination of things, but just being closer to nature and a little bit more grounded. And I've had a lot of spinal surgeries in my life, and I spent a lot of time in some pain, a lot of nerve pain. And when I first came to Costa Rica, I noticed that I was in significantly less pain. And so that was also a big motivating factor that, winters just kept getting harder and harder in DC, and I became less and less mobile, and that completely changed, when I moved to Costa Rica.
And was that just because of the temperature and the climate which changed, or was it the food and the way of life you were having?
I think it's like a 12-part answer. I think it's like eating more whole foods, having less stress in my life, breathing cleaner air, spending more time outside, getting more vitamin D, being barefoot more often, just getting, not being so influenced by alarm clocks and light fixtures and more influenced by, the circadian rhythm and being so close to the equator. I don't know what's changed the pain levels. I don't know if the barometric pressure is I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I just know my body doesn't like the cold, and it's never really that cold here,
That's amazing. It's great to hear that that's a positive change in your life, which is always a nice thing to have when you live abroad. So why did you think of going to Costa Rica? Was it for were you traveling for South America, or were you just throw a dot on a map and go there? What was the kind of reason for Costa Rica?
People ask me that all the time, and I was trying to think of the answer why, and I realized that it's really kind of embedded in my whole childhood in a way. Like, we had a exchange student when I was in 8th grade, and she was from Costa Rica. My best friend in high school was from Costa Rica. So I think it was just sort of always there. And then when I came and visited, it was in March of 2016, and I was just in so much pain in DC because it was the end of the winter. And I came to Costa Rica, and there was such a huge difference. And so that was what really kind of kicked it off. But where I don't know. I think it was just always there. I always, what I knew of Costa Ricans are both beautiful humans and just really, beautiful countries, beautiful people. And I just wanted to learn more.
Oh, wow. So it's always kind of been a stable part of your life then with your friends and exchange students. It was quite an early fixture in your childhood, which might have embedded itself in your subconscious, perhaps. When you then moved in, when was that in terms of how long ago did you move to Costa Rica?
In January of 2021, so 10 months into the pandemic or whatever.
So did that make a huge difference in terms of being able to move? Were you looking to move before the pandemic and then you got delayed, or?
Not at all. I had a very brick and mortar business in Washington, D.C. I own a podcast production agency, and we had a recording studio in downtown D.C. and a beautiful castle mansion, and business was really picking up and gaining momentum. And then the pandemic happened, and, the city was shut down. The mayor, ordered everybody to stay home. And all of a sudden, my very physical, business had to adjust, right? And so I quickly closed the lease on. I had a lease on a house and a lease on a commercial space, and I had multiple Airbnbs. In April of 2020, I closed all of the leases on all of the properties, took a hit on some of the stuff, but just stopped the bleed, before it got worse. And everybody thought I was closing my business, but I was like, no, I'm closing the liabilities because the Airbnb money dried up. I'm not going to ask my clients to defy the mayor. And it's March 2020. We're all wearing spacesuits to Costco and stuff. It was, we were afraid to touch our doorknobs. It was a crazy time. I was not trying to force my clients to come in. Nobody was even recording anyway, right? So it was kind of a moot point. So I closed the leases and took a month off, and then just realized I'm going to be better at doing everything fully remote than everybody else. And so I revamped in May of 2020 and grew the business 200% that year by adjusting to the new virtual world, because we sell podcasting as a business development tool. So interview the people you want to do business with, and then you get SEO, and then you get social proof, but really it's about the relationship. And so a lot of our clients like couldn't go to conventions, couldn't go to, meetings anymore, networking things. So the podcast became an even more viable tool, and being able to do things remotely opened up the world. And so when it was presented and produced the right way, my clients saw a lot of value in that. So we grew. I was pretty untethered, but I was still paying a lot of money to live just outside of Washington, D.C., and I was working fully remote. And Costa Rica had been like a 10-year plan. It was I'm going to grow this business, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to parlay that into a speaking career, and then I can travel. Because in 2019, it was hard for me to imagine where I could work remotely in Costa Rica and make money. It was once I've really hit all my goals and success and I have some money, then I'll go. But then all of a sudden, the whole world changed, and here I was with this opportunity. January 2021, if I go now and I tell my clients now, hey, we're going to be remote for a while, and instead of being in DC, I'm going to have a Costa Rican background, but everything's going to be fine. And they were like, all right, let's see what happens. And sure enough, everything was fine. So it was not super planned in that sense, but I just figured, it's a good time to go now. Get my clients used to it, and more importantly, make sure it's something that I want to do, because, a lot of people put off happiness and what they want until later, but later isn't promised, and the pandemic really showed us that. And, you've moved around the world, lots of people move someplace and they romanticize it, and 3 months later, they're out, It's not for everybody, and rightfully so. So I really wanted to explore that before I was 70. And couldn't enjoy it anyway.
That's a very good point you make, and a lot of people do delay the kind of rewarding themselves with things that will bring them joy. The beauty about living abroad, and a lot of people who can go abroad, you can always go back. So why not try and do it when you're younger, when you've got less responsibility, or you've got more freedom, and you've got actually a chance to go back and pick up what you left in case it wasn't the right decision. But at least you've tried it. Whereas, if you delay it 10 years, you might go, well, what if I did it then? I love it so much. I could have been here for X number of years beforehand and really made the most out of it. Yeah, and you kind of regret it a bit. So you did the right thing of just riding the wave of the moving to remote working at the right time. And I guess the start of a pandemic of podcasting, because during the pandemic, everyone got into podcasts a lot more because they had a lot more free time to go walking. And in the UK, I got a lot into podcasts a lot because my one activity a day was going for a very long walk to listen to 3 or 4 podcasts in 3 hours or 4 hours, just because it was the thing I could be in nature and do. And it was kind of saved me a little bit during the pandemic in terms of my sanity. So it was it's a good time to be a podcast producer from your side. So in terms of then moving to Costa Rica, did you need to get a visa? Did you need to get accommodation? What was your kind of approach to doing that whilst you were still in the US?
Well, Costa Rica has a pretty lenient tourist visa program. So when you come into the country, you get a visa for however long you're going to be there, up to 180 days. It used to be 90 days, but they just changed it to 6 months. But if you're coming in as a tourist and you're leaving a week later, you get a 7-day visa. So when you come into the country, if you show a return ticket leaving the country 79 days later, then you'll get that stamp. So it really just, about what you show them. So in the beginning, I had to do a lot of border runs, we call them, because Nicaragua is not that far. It's about 2.5 hours drive to the Nicaraguan border from where I live. And so, that's kind of what you do. You drive up, you park the car, you do all the different, pay this tax, pay that tax, do all this stuff that's not abundantly clear to you. You walk across a border, you go in, you get stamped the Nicaraguan stamp, you walk back out of the building, you walk into the other side, you get stamped again, and you cross back into Costa Rica, and then you're good for another 90 days, So that's kind of the routine, if you will, So they're pretty lax. They do have various residency and turista and rentista, and there's all these different classifications of visas that you can get that they don't make it terribly hard to obtain here in Costa Rica, because they recognize that immigrants like me bring a lot of money into the country, and if we're encouraged to stay, then we buy homes or rent and buy at the same grocery store every week and go to the pharmacy and, really become a part of the community instead of just kind of moving through.
Yeah, it contributes to the economy with money you're earning from outside the country. So it's a positive from their point of view.
Exactly.
Are you still on a tourist visa now, or have you kind of changed to a residency visa, or what's the situation for you?
Well, I had worked with an attorney to get that happen, but in classic Costa Rican style, it hasn't happened yet. So I have to start over. But the goal is to have I bought a home, and when you buy a home, you automatically get the residency visa, but you still have to apply for it, but you don't have to show all of the income, and it's not nearly as strenuous as a process because you've shown an investment in the country, and they're like, that's good enough,
And in terms of when you moved, the accommodation you had, did you rent an Airbnb, or did you kind of find somewhere to live, or use a network of friends? How did you do that before you moved?
Well, this is when the story gets a little bit more interesting. So when I first moved to Costa Rica, I had a business partner, investor, who was like, I have some people that have a house in Costa Rica in Playa del Coyote, right? And so I was like, okay, great. He's like, you can stay in the house for free. You just got to get the Wi-Fi set up. I was like, awesome, great. I didn't really understand the layout of Costa. I had been there once, but I just, whatever. I was just going to figure it out. So I get there, and it's a super remote area. My phone doesn't work. There's no furniture in the living room. It was just, I wasn't going to be able to stay there. You know what I mean? And so I lasted 3 days there and ended up going up to Tamarindo. And I had a friend who was more of a colleague in the music industry in DC. And I had hung out with her once or twice, but we weren't super close. But her and her fiance were there. And they ended up leaving a month and a half later. But I went to Tamarindo, got an Airbnb for 2 nights, found a place to rent, and then moved in there. So I really only knew one couple, and they ended up leaving shortly after. But they introduced me to a couple people who ended up introducing me to a lot more. But when I moved into that house, 3 weeks later, I was drugged and robbed in a home invasion by 3 masked professional men, and so it was quite the welcome to Costa Rica. Yeah, it was quite the welcome.
Well, I'm sure we'll dig a bit deeper into your life in Costa Rica, and sorry to hear that happened to you, and good to see that you're okay now. It must have been, you're still there, so it mustn't have put you off Costa Rica too much, but I'm sure you're a bit more vigilant perhaps, which can't be a nice experience to have. In terms, did you move by yourself then when you first came, or with friends or family, or?
Yeah, I moved by myself and my dog.
It's been quite exciting. Your dog?
Yeah, my little dog, yeah.
That's so cool. How old is your dog? Or?
Well, she's no longer with us. She's in the backyard now, but she lived to be 21, so she had a good run. Yeah, she had a good run.
Some very good innings. Yeah. Was there anything else you kind of needed to do before you moved? Did you kind of have Spanish lessons, or did you know Spanish before? Or?
I figured I'd work it out when I got here, but yeah, I gave everything away, because, it was in the pandemic, so I was trying to sell stuff and Facebook Market, but it was just not going to happen. So I gave pretty much everything away, which felt really good. And a friend of mine took a bunch of my bins of my stuff, and I left them at her house. And I packed, exactly, however many bags I could, bring with me. It was 2 70-pound bags, 1 50-pound bag, or something along those lines, and yeah, man, just kind of hoped for the best.
Incredible. I think that's a great way of ending the kind of getting there part, and we can get into the being there. So welcome back to the podcast, World Position 2, all about being there. So Molly, this is kind of where I understand a bit more about your life in Costa Rica in your case, or wherever I guess to live. We kind of touched upon it already in the first section about your quite memorable part of the start to the living in Costa Rica, which was unfortunate in your sense, but good to see you're fine now, and it's good. But in terms of that kind of initial first impression of the country, apart from that horrible evening you had, what did you think of Costa Rica?
Well, it was a very different time in the pandemic. Everything was like kind of shut down. So it was very, very quiet. I think I knew it wasn't a normal snapshot of Costa Rica, but I was happy to be here. I was excited to be here. I was grateful because, it was January. So it was like, pandemic happened in March, and then we had that crazy summer, and then it got cold, and I left in January. It had been cold for months. So, I was just grateful to be outside, getting fresh air and sunshine, and I was very happy to be here.
Great. And then I guess you had that horrible home invasion and situation. At that point, did you want to go back, or what were you thinking then in terms of you kind of sold everything back home or got rid of it, moved over? This happened, in the first week or the first couple of weeks? And yeah, did you then want to go back, or what was your kind of reaction to that? Or...
everybody always says that, and they always say, I can't believe you didn't want to go back. But like, there was nothing to go back to. I had sold my car. I gave everything away. I gave up my lease. It was like, and it wasn't easy to just move around. Borders were being open and closed. It's not like you could just willy-nilly all over the place. So, and that experience changed me to this moment, but I was living in Washington, D.C. prior to that, where, there was gunshots and brutal murders across the street from my house. And, people literally trying to kill me because I'm riding my bicycle, just unhinged violence and anger and crime all the time. And when that home invasion happened, it wasn't personal. Like, I hadn't gone out. I hadn't met anybody. I used the same taxi driver twice. Like, when you're from a city that has a lot of crime, you have some street smarts. I didn't just show up talking about pura vida, I live in this house over here. Like, I was very careful, And they were just watching in the neighborhood. It was a new house. They were waiting for somebody to move in. I forgot to close, a very small window, and that was the end of that. And so it didn't feel personal to me. And I somehow managed to stay in that house for almost a month, which was probably more of a mistake than staying in Costa Rica, because I think that did more damage long-term, staying in the same environment, but it changed me to my core. I feel like a rescue animal sometimes. Like, I got a little like, woo in me, but like, I'm not fearful of people. I don't look at people differently. Like, I'm still very happy to be here, but like, if there's a loud noise in the middle of the night, I'm going to sit up dead awake with my heart racing before my brain can even, catch up with why I'm, reacting that way. But does it make me feel like I can't trust anybody here, or Ticos, or there's none of that, because, I don't even know who it was. It could have been a Nicaraguan. It could have been Ticos. It could have been a Colombian. It could have been an American. I never, so there was no judgment there, but it definitely made me very aware that I am in another country, and that you can't make any assumptions. And, it can be pretty scary when stuff goes down, because, we called the cops and they didn't show up, and then we called again, and then they came in with their 2-foot-long guns blazing like the robbery was still happening, just to further traumatize you. And then they stood in my kitchen with their fingers not on the triggers, but like over top of the trigger on these giant guns, speaking in very rapid Spanish for like 45 minutes. And I was like literally coming out of being drugged, super confused and not understanding anything. So it's a good reminder as a very privileged American to like, have some humility, learn the language, respect where you're at. And like, the world is not my playground, and like, I'm a guest here, and I have to really like pay attention.
It's a very good point about, we're guests everywhere, I suppose. It's interesting to think about that. And I guess if you come from quite a privileged country like America or Europe and stuff like that, you do often go to countries and have a bit of arrogance or naivety, probably is a better word for it, thinking it will be what you expect. And it probably isn't, because people are more desperate maybe, or there's just a different balance of equality. And, people opportunistic, as you said, you left a window slightly ajar, and opportunistic people took advantage of that, which you kind of predicted. And I guess, when you learn a lesson from that yourself and will act differently in future. And you just, I guess very lucky for it not to be any worse, which is probably the silver lining in that situation. What was it like in living, or not living, but interacting with the police or with the government in Costa Rica. Was that what you expected? Was it different to the US? Did it last for a few weeks afterwards?
No, it was pretty lackluster, to be honest. I went and filed a report at the Costa Rican FBI, then we never heard anything again. I do know that, they're trying, but we make a lot of assumptions as Americans. I'm just going to speak on behalf of all of us real quick, but and I see it. They'll have meetings with the U.S. Department of Defense or the State Department, and they're like, "What are you guys going to do about the crime here?" And they're like, "It's not our country. We're not going to do anything about it. You left America, moved to another country, and you expect us to show up and tell them how to run their government?" And they say it in a much more diplomatic way, but it's like, yeah, guys, we are the ones that left. We don't just get all these American protections and benefits, and it's wild that people are like, you would think all the money they're making off of us. God, it's just what about Costa Ricans? They're also living with crime. Somehow it should change now because we're here and we're spending money. Meanwhile, this has been a problem. Every Costa Rican has a story of being drugged and robbed as well. It wasn't, Tico homes have barbed wire on them, so it's just a really good, to me, it's a good reminder on privilege, and just to I don't even refer to myself as an expat. Honestly, I refer to myself as an immigrant because I've never heard a single American refer to a Mexican as an expat, and I know there's some nuance there, but it's at the end of the day, I'm an immigrant in this country, and I'm super cool with that because it's not a dirty word, and I'm super grateful to be here,
No, yeah, completely. I think I agree that it's not a dirty word at all. It's they're quite interchangeable. It's just another word you can use for the same thing. It's a wonderful thing about English language. You've got several words for the same thing, but the immigrant podcast didn't sound as good as the expat, so I went for the expat. But it's an interesting point how you prefer to see yourself as that, because you're probably right. You've gone there for a better life because it's better for your own physical condition, which is I guess what everyone wants to do when they move countries. It's for that reason, to get a better life, which is obviously the beauty of living abroad and wherever you're from, wherever you're going. So being in Costa Rica, other than the quite difficult start, once you kind of got settled, what was it like in terms of, did you stay in the same area? Did you stay in the same city, or did you move around a bit more before you kind of found somewhere to live?
I moved about 40 minutes away into an apartment building that I felt very safe in, and I made friends with everybody in the building, most of which I'm still friends with to this day, even though I moved out 2 years ago. It's kind of like Melrose Place. I don't know if you remember that TV show. Dating myself with that one, but and that was great because I felt safe there. And so that kind of chilled everything out for me. And then I built this little community, and I lived there for a year. And then I came to visit this other part of Costa Rica where I am now. And I just fell in love and was like, this is exactly where I want to be. So I live on Lake Arenal now, which is the biggest lake in Costa Rica. It was a smaller lake, but they made it much bigger and built a dam, and it supplies 40% of Costa Rica's power. And rumor has it there's an alien portal at the bottom of it. So, You're going
to try and find that one day, or go diving? Or 3 stars, maybe you can go down there and try and get a way out, maybe, or something.
Exactly.
And then what's it been like? So you've made friends with people in the building you live with. How was it like socializing and finding people? Was it mainly expats, or did you find locals or other travelers? What was the kind of split between those kind of groups?
It was, I met a lot of gringos for sure, but then some of my gringo friends have Tico friends, and my Spanish has gotten much better, but it wasn't that great in the beginning, so it's a little harder, you know what I mean? If they don't speak English, it makes it super hard, but I have found it very easy to make friends here. I have some of the best friendships of my adult life living here. People, because, it takes a certain type of person to leave everything and try, so it already kind of puts you in the same category of people. And it makes some of those other differences not as much of a chasm. You know what I mean? It's and so I have great friendships here, very intentional friendships of people who are very like-minded and appreciate going to hike a waterfall or being outside and going out on the boat and, doing things like that. And I like that my friends now want to do stuff during the day versus going to some douchey bar in DC and spending a bunch of money and, I'd rather meet you at the waterfall at 8 a.m. I'm good. I'm good. Like I'm flying back to DC Thursday, and I have a black tie event I'm going to on Friday, and I have no idea what I'm going to wear because I don't even have shoes, for that thing. I got flip-flops and tennis shoes. So, you adjust when you live here to just a whole different thing, and you tend to find people that are in that mindset.
You can always maybe rent an outfit when you're in DC, perhaps?
I don't know how it's going to go. I'm going to have to find a Macy's or something. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's a good problem to have.
The airport might have something, perhaps.
I know. I was like, do they have shoes at duty free? I don't think so.
Well, that sounds amazing then. And how have you found the kind of nature of where you're living? How are you far away from places to go hiking or go exploring? Is it all quite close?
Super close. I literally can see the volcano from where I'm sitting right now and the lake. So there's boats to go on and mountains to climb and waterfalls there's just no shortage of things to do here. So world-class beaches 2.5 hours away from here. 68 degrees year round. Yeah, there's no heat or air conditioning in my house, which I just think is super cool. Think about how much, less energy I'm using. I just open the doors and windows. That's nice,
Like an earth ship, effectively. That's really cool. Does it get too warm then in the summer, or is it kind of quite similar temperature throughout the year because it's so close to the equator?
Well, where I am, I'm in the mountains. I'm 2,500 feet above sea level on the lake. So even in town, which is 25 minutes away, it's warmer than it is here. And I get a lot of wind where I'm at. But at the beaches, it could be 180 degrees. It's not really, but it feels like your shoes are going to melt on the pavement. It's insanely hot, So, and that's only 2.5 hours from here. And it's really only 100 kilometers, 50 miles. It's super close. It just takes a long time to get there because they're, small 1-lane roads and, stuff like that. Very windy, but if you really measure distance to distance, it's a very short jump and the temperature difference is 50 degree. Well, no, probably 30 degree difference sometimes, 20 degree difference. Yeah. It's insane.
And do you have a car there then? Have you found driving in Costa Rica compared to the US less crazy or?
There's always a chance you're going to die every time you get in your car because the roads are so narrow and windy and they're just not wide enough for an 18-wheeler to make turns. You're just but somehow it's still significantly less stressful than sitting in Ubers or riding a bike in DC.
I can imagine the roads more developed, so is the traffic because of that, and there's probably less beautiful landscapes to be in and enjoying, which is kind of both sides of the coin for each place. And then how have you found in terms of being there now, your language has improved? How have you achieved that? Did you get lessons? Have you just, doing a lot of Duolingo? Have you done tutoring or kind of joined language cafes, that kind of thing?
Well, a lot of it is immersion, but I definitely had a Spanish tutor for twice a week for probably 8 weeks or so. And that made a really big difference because, Ticos speak a very different, that's what they call Costa Ricans, a very different type of Spanish, just like Mexicans speak a different Spanish, just like people from Spain speak a different Spanish. It's very nuanced, you know what I mean? So it's it's important to learn from somebody here because they don't really use usted here very much. The formal, it's always tú, it's very rarely usted. So there's just all these nuances. So I find that if somebody, as much as I appreciate wanting to be prepared and all of that, the best thing you can do is move someplace and then just immerse yourself in it and learn from a local, because then you can support the local economy and learn the local version of that language. My friend from Venezuela came to visit and he was I can't understand them. And he speaks Spanish. So just go wherever you're going to go and figure it out,
I think it's the same in some parts of England, to be fair. The accents change quite a lot. I'm sure in the US it's quite stark, Southern Texas versus
New York
New Hampshire
City.
Or...
Exactly.
And then also, whilst you've been there, how have you found remote working then? How has that changed your life in terms of the ability to kind of control where you're living and working while still having the same kind of professional career you've kind of grown before you left?
Well, that's a loaded question, right? I have noticed now after 3 years that my business has slowed down a little bit because I haven't been going back as much. And so I'm actually planning to spend more time going back because I think in business, you have to be visible because people forget about you. Out of sight, out of mind, right? And everybody knows I produce podcasts, right? You want a podcast, talk to Molly. You want to go on podcast, talk to Molly. Podcast Molly, podcast Molly. But then I left the country, and people just think I'm over here hanging out with sloths and drinking pina coladas, and, and it's like, I wish that was true all the time, but it is not. I'm still working, and I kind of took my my foot off the gas a little bit with speaking engagements and stuff, and so business slowed down. So I'm in the process of doing more stuff, going on more podcasts. I'm going back to a big networking event this week, putting a little more effort. And I think it's a good reminder that you can work from anywhere in the world, but you still need to be top of mind with people. So if you're going to work remotely, then you need to do a lot more webinars. You need to do a lot more podcasts. You need to just be writing more newsletters, whatever it is, because, people will forget. They're like, oh, she's in Costa Rica. Well, listen, I got Starlink. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter that I'm in Costa Rica. That has nothing to do with nothing. I'm right in the middle of the United States time zone now. I'm right behind, California and DC. I'm right in the middle. I'm up. You know what I mean? Let's go. Being in Costa Rica shouldn't impact anything. But if you're not staying top of mind with your client base, it's not the remote that's failing you. It's your sales. It's your visibility, depending on your industry, of course. You know what I mean? But for me, that's relevant.
And to get more popular on LinkedIn or something, just to keep your name out there or whatever, it's quite difficult.
To remind people, I started doing a newsletter pretty consistently again and just talking about like podcast strategies and just typing them out. And I'm getting discovery calls from that, from people who are like, you clearly know what you're talking about. I'm interested in talking strategy. It's like, yeah, something as simple as that. But I mean, there was like a solid 8 months where I didn't put any newsletters out. So, I mean, as far as they knew, I fell off the boat, literally,
So then you mentioned about then kind of going back and forth more often. How often have you been going back to the US beforehand, or what's been your kind of cadence for seeing friends or family back home?
Well, I went back 6 times the first year, and then I went back a few more times the second year, and then that's really slowed down. And it's expensive. It's expensive to fly from Costa Rica. Like, I was looking at flights to the British Virgin Islands the other day, and it actually is cheaper and like 10 hours less of travel time to fly back to DC and then to have a completely separate flight to the British Virgin Islands. And it would have been like $600 versus $3,000. Like, they don't make it easy to leave this place, you know what I mean? And, I don't understand airline or any of that stuff, but they definitely make it harder for Ticos to leave this country, and so I just kind of slowed down because there was a lot of money being spent on airfare. I spent like almost 10 grand on airfare in the last 3 years. That's a lot of bread.
Yeah, it's just a lot of air miles you've clocked up there as well. So hopefully you're getting some rewards for that too.
Lots of free gin and tonics, luckily. So I'll take it.
In terms of then like homesickness, so obviously you got home quite a lot the first year and stuff. You may not have felt it so much. Have you felt that? Maybe obviously after your initial start, did you miss certain things, certain people, certain foods, or little things like that, TV shows? They're all kind of small things that you're going to have in your life. Like for me, I miss like British biscuits when I was away, or like silly things like that, or like BBC News or something.
I definitely miss good food, and everybody's like, Costa Rica is the best food, and people who live here are like, no, they don't. We have great Whole Foods and like options, but like it's not a culinary place. Most of South America and Central America isn't. Mexico is like the shining star of like food, you know what I mean? But so I come from DC. We have like James Beard award-winning, lunch counters and stuff. So it's like I was super spoiled by having amazing food. So I do miss that a little bit. But no, I don't. I don't get homesick at all. I miss people and I miss that, but not enough to be like, I want to move back, not at all. And, the thing is that the city that I love is not the city that DC is not the city that I love. That city is so far gone. First of all, I'm older. All my friends left that city. That's what happens in cities. You get to a certain age, you leave, you have kids, you never come back. So you age yourself out of a city anyway. Then the pandemic happened and I moved into, you know what I mean? There's so many things. So even going back to the city, it wouldn't be the city that I left. so many of those people aren't there anymore, you know? So I don't have a homesickness for a place that doesn't exist anymore, you know? And I make a point to spend time with my dad. My mom passed away 2 years ago. So, you know, thank you. I spend time, you know, with my dad, but, you know, with WhatsApp and video calls and Zoom and, you know, I get to see people.
But we're talking now, right, on video, and I'm literally the side of the Atlantic Ocean to you.
It's cool, you know what I mean? Now, it's obviously always better to be in the same room and get a hug and feel that energy and all that. But it's not like, you know, if I had moved here 10 years earlier, there wasn't even Wi-Fi yet. You know, would have been a very different situation.
Is your dad, does he live in Washington too, or somewhere else in the US? Or?
He lives in West Virginia, but it's like an hour and 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. Like very all highway, very close.
Is that where the country roads take you home, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the only thing I know of West Virginia. Is that one song?
Yeah, that was good. That was pretty, I mean, you know, that's pretty good.
Thank you. I do make some really bad dad jokes.
It's okay.
Covered quite a lot, I guess, about your moving abroad. Then I guess when you left the US, that must have been the January 6th insurrection in DC at the same time. Because you said you moved in January, so it must have been quite an interesting place to leave the US at that time. It can't have been an easy place to have lived. Might help make decisions.
Truly, it was horrible to just like, you know, they talk about like drain the swamp and they show all this police and riot gear and all this stuff. Like, the thing about DC is it's so small. It's 6 miles from one end to the other. Now, it could go a little further north and south and it's hillier, but everything that you've ever seen about Washington, D.C. is in that center swath, you know? So all the places you guys were seeing on the news were places that I used to ride my bike around with my friends on Monday night. Like, this is not, you know, people talk about drain the swamp, but like, it's first of all, it's not a swamp, not literally or figuratively, okay? And it's not. That's a misnomer. And all those politicians don't live there. They don't live there. You know who lives there? People trying to survive a city that's constantly getting gentrified, constantly getting outpriced, constantly just being pummeled by new administration after new administration. I mean, it's sickening. You know what I mean? So many black people being displaced, families being displaced, and they're like, drain the swamp. The swamp. It's like enough already. You know what I mean? And it's like, just to see the insurrection unfolding. I mean, we have 26 separate police forces in Washington, D.C. 6 separate police forces, FBI, CIA, DEA, Park Police, Museum Police, Special Police, Peace Police. I mean, I don't even know all 26 of them. Do you know how many of them had to ignore what was going on for that to happen? It was mind-boggling. To me, it felt like the end of everything.
Yeah, it was quite sobering to watch, I think, at the time. I've seen quite a few videos. I think it was the guy, the Finger on the Pulse or something, by some comedian who used to be on a Trevor Noah show. He was there live. I watched a lot of videos like that, and it was quite an interesting thing to experience. Yeah, and you talk about like other countries, and you know, England's not much better, but we were right without guns, I suppose. But that's about it. And we still have a lot of people chanting in streets and stuff, but it's quite difficult.
It was wild. And then look what happened afterwards. You know what I mean? The George Floyd summer. I mean, to me, it kind of signifies the end of America in a lot. I mean, you know, it's this lack of accountability. Like, for me, it started with Trump, but it's like, I was raised to think that if you storm the Capitol and kill a police officer, that there would be repercussions for that. Like, I was raised to believe that you don't just, like, break windows and break into a place because you don't like the policy. You educate yourself. You run for those positions. You advocate for, you know what I mean? Like, or get on the ballot yourself. But like, so to see all of this just really unfolding, I don't think I'll ever be the same, honestly. You know, it really...
Have you had much experience of like the politics in Costa Rica in terms of what you've experienced life out there, in terms of how different it is to the US, or what's the whole makeup of it like?
There's no real politics here, to be honest. It's very, very chill. However, there's a lot of gringos here with extreme political, you know, opinions, about America and Canada, which can be tiring because you're like, hey guys, you're not there anymore, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point, yeah.
Enough, you know what I mean? People have lived here for 12 years and they're still posting about Sleepy Joe and the Ho. I'm like, you've been in Costa Rica for 12 years. How could you possibly be this invested in being this angry and this ignorant from afar, right? So it is really interesting that socialist country has attracted so many Trumpers. I mean, it's really wild to me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, guys really need to read more, and, for people who have such problems with immigrants and wants to build walls, and then they come down here and they don't take their visa requirements seriously and they go late and they say, oh, just pay this guy and he'll take care of it. And I'm like, you're the same people who want to build the wall. But you don't see this issue with coming down here and skirting him. You're an illegal immigrant right now. Oh, you want to piss somebody? You want to piss off an old white guy in Costa Rica? Tell him that, And so but then the flip
But they
side.
need to hear it, right? People need to hear that and have that empathy, because that's one thing I learned about living abroad is you gain empathy from other people's views. And I understood a lot more what it's like to learn a second language, to try and speak it, and how hard it is and how brave people are. If you hear someone with an accent, it means they're brave. They've come and they've learned something new and they're trying. You can't speak with their language, so don't have a go at them for not speaking yours. And, it's incredible to see all these incredible people who've, risked everything and come and left all their family or left so many things at home to take a risk to better themselves or grow or whatever. And you get this kind of reverse culture shock looking back at your own country and going, actually, that's not perfect. We could do X, Y, and Z better because I've got this experience. And you talk to people, and that's the beauty of traveling, and why I love doing this podcast is that I get these viewpoints from people who've lived anywhere in the world. Like, I've not been to Costa Rica, so I don't know what it's like, but from speaking to yourself about it, I don't get a view of Costa Rican life and what kind of is to be in that situation, which is wonderful for me because I learn something every time. And it's just, why I love podcasting now. It's such a great thing to do. And thank you for sharing your stories in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. One, for all those people, there's also people here that are like grateful to be here, excited to contribute to the community, try to speak Spanish, and so it's a nice balance. You just kind of gotta find your way. But in regards to Ticos and their politics, it's really interesting, actually. The political parties aren't like red and blue, and you don't see like political signs in people's yards with like somebody's face on them. What they do is each party has a flag, maybe to a green, white, and green stripe, and the other one is half red, half blue. And they're these little flags, and people put them up in front of their house on a pole. It's this little letter-sized flag, and they just put it up in front of their house. So when you're driving down the street, you can kind of see, green, red, 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 green, green, And that's it. There's not these like big obnoxious symbols, and then they come down after the voting period. So it's short-lived. So it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, it's a good. We have something in the UK where we have two main parties, but loads of fringe parties, which are still get some seats in Parliament, which I guess is your Senate or House of Representatives or whatever. So it's still people do put the pickets in the driveway or in the front yards, but not many do. It's like 10% of the population have that on, because it's quite a personal thing with who you vote for. It's not something people really talk about. It's like, you voted, well done, that's all that matters. You've used your democratic right to do that. I don't really care who you voted for, as long as you read the manifestos, made an educated decision, and that was it. That's how it should be, really. But yeah, I think we've exhausted this topic, which is great. I don't know, you want to go to the third section, all about your review of your time? Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to section 3, which is a kind of review of your time. So Molly, this is where I kind of get my guests to maybe kind of think back to when they first moved, and if they could offer themselves some advice or change anything, if they would do, or what bit of advice they might give themselves to enhance the experience they've had, or just, prevent something from happening. So if you could think about when you first moved, is there something you'd tell yourself or something you'd like to do differently?
I don't really have any regrets, but I would just say, like, take it easy. Like, a lot of people move here and they want to like find a place before they get here, or they're building a house and they want the house to be done and the cable to be installed before they get here, and it just doesn't work that way. I think if you're going to move someplace, it's good to rent someplace. It's not a single house. Don't put yourself out in the middle of nowhere. Put yourself in an apartment building, rent for a couple months, and look around. Because I think as Americans, we have a habit, like the Amazon culture of like, I'm moving on Thursday, so on Saturday morning, an Amazon delivery is going to show up at my new apartment with like every single thing that I need. Well, that just doesn't happen here, right? So I think just moving a little slower. Don't rush into things, and like check things out before you decide where you want to commit long term.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point to do. And yet we do live in the next day society where, you know, people do have things on demand all the time. And it's probably quite bad for your mental health just to be constantly switched on or constantly expecting things and having that chance to slow down, have a Sunday off, right? You know, which we used to have all the time, but no one seems to have a Sunday off anymore. And it's very useful for you just to be with nature or be with nothing. Leave your phone at home, leave your watch at home, just go for a walk. Great. And then, you know, obviously you've set roots down with buying a house and everything, but would you consider moving somewhere else in the future, or is Costa Rica now going to be your home for the foreseeable?
I see myself being here for a long time. My goal with Costa Rica was to drop my living expenses so that I would have more bandwidth to travel. You know, if I don't have a mortgage payment, it makes a lot more sense to pack up for a month and go to Ireland or something, versus if you're paying a lot of rent or mortgage in a city, there's nothing left. You know, so I plan on being here, but I don't plan on staying here, if that makes any sense, you know?
Is it going to be your base?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you're going to use that as your kind of helipad to go everywhere else.
Because it's a lovely place to come home to, you know, perfect weather, big. I mean, it's nice. But when I really want to, like, I'm going to D.C. this week, and I cannot wait to eat all weekend because I miss so much food, you know? But then I'll be so happy to come back here because DC is also really stressful. So this is an excellent place to come back to.
What's the one thing you're going to look forward to eating when you get back then? What's that one thing that you're looking forward to?
Everything. DC does soul food really good. Fried chicken, biscuits, greens, you know, all of the things that make your arteries clog. You know, that's my jam.
I guess you can always drive to Philly, get a cheesesteak as well then, so add to the list too. And then looking kind of at your kind of advice for people who would be moving abroad themselves, so anyone else you know who might leave the US, maybe in a similar situation where they can do a remote working job, what bit of advice might you give to them?
Do it. Just, you know, my buddy has this, he's a life coach in Maurice Philogin, and he has this slogan, it says, try life on. And I think it's a great, try it on, see if it works. You know, you don't have to go forever. Don't jump all the way in, but just give it a shot because you never know. And everything is possible. Not just anything, but everything is possible. And I think that, you know, life moves fast, you know, and I decided that I wanted to make the next 20 the best 20. And that's what really pushed me out the door. So if you're feeling unfulfilled in your life and you're not really happy and you have this itch to go, do it. Do it. Just don't like sell everything you own and buy land before you get here. Just like, don't go into a manic episode, but like put yourself in storage for a couple months and work it out. Rent your house on Airbnb. Go list it to a friend or something. Be smart about it and go check it out. Don't put off what happiness for a later date because it might never happen.
That's a very, very good point and very, very valuable. I love that slogan, try life on. It really, really works so well. I hope it's on t-shirts somewhere. If not, it should be. Hopefully one that fits. Otherwise, it will be an incorrect slogan. But that's beautiful. I really, really enjoy that. And if you could give someone advice for Costa Rica specifically, what might you give them which would kind of work in your new country, in your home?
Join the crime groups in all the neighborhoods that you're thinking about living in first, because there's a real problem with like victim blaming. And if you talk about the crime here, they remove you from the groups. Like people do not want their utopian dream to be disrupted, and they will shame you and delete your posts and kick you out of groups just for telling the truth. So when you move to Costa Rica, if you just join the expats in North America and those types of groups, you're just going to get, oh, I love my neighborhood. I love my neighborhood. Well, I loved my neighborhood too until 3 men were in my house in ski masks. You know what I mean? So like, just because something hasn't happened to them doesn't mean that there's not crime happening all around them. So don't believe everybody, because they will swear up and down that pura vida, I've lived here for 14 years, never leave my phone everywhere. I'm like, that's wild, because Costa Ricans, like, you know, crime rate is out. I mean, it's like people live in 2 different planets. So if you're going to come here, join the crime groups for those areas so that you can properly educate yourself on where you want to live, because there are certain areas right now in Costa Rica that are on fire, and we're just in between Colombia and the United States. The cocaine superhighway, and there's a lot of cartel stuff popping off right now. So I'm not saying it's a bad place to live, but like you should understand where you live and educate yourself. Like I probably wouldn't move to Limon, but I would be more likely to move to the west coast of Costa Rica, but not certain parts, right? So like just educate yourself a little bit and don't buy a house, don't sign a 1-year lease. Like give yourself 3 months to like actually understand, because you might think you want to live at the beach, but then you might realize the grocery store is too far and it's too hot and everything's too expensive, so like give yourself that flexibility to figure that out before you commit to a long-term lease or any massive financial commitment.
And the crime groups, are they on Facebook, or are they websites or anything, or on Facebook? That's
Facebook,
good.
Yeah. And they'll tell you the real deal because they're like, started by people who are actually reporting the crime and not the like tourist groups, you know what I mean? Full of realtors and people trying to sell you stuff and tell you how great Costa Rica is, you know what I mean? Which it is, don't get me wrong, it is, but this is something that's happening. Just like I love DC. All kinds of crime happening there too. Like that doesn't mean I hate DC. I'm not talking smack about DC, but it is super real there right now. You know what I mean? Like
it's reality, it's not utopia, as you said before.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, is there anything more you wish to share about your life abroad, or anything which you want to share with our listeners in terms of things they should do, or apart from just do it or try life on?
Well, one of my favorite exercises is the perfect day exercise. It's pretty common, and you just really think about what would a perfect day look like. Like, where do you wake up? Do you lay in your bed for an hour? Do you work out? Do you read? Is it hot? Is it cold? What do you do for the first 3 hours of your day? How many hours a day do you want to work? Do you want to travel? Do you want to garden? Like really think about what it is you want and kind of try to remove all the obstacles that are preventing that from happening now, and just focus on what it is that you really want, which is hard. It's a really hard exercise because I think when you get really clear on what it is you want, it's a lot easier to reverse engineer it. And so my biggest recommendation is take a moment, put your phone in another room, turn everything off and sit someplace quiet and really think about what would your perfect day look like. And then make it happen, because it is possible.
No, it's a great bit of advice, and probably some exercises online which might help with that, or I guess you want to avoid being online, but at least a framework to help ask those questions to begin with. Or for me, a perfect week would be somewhere to start, because I like to do different things each day.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Same.
It's a great way of packaging it. I'm very much a person who believes in gratitude and trying to stay thankful for things. And my girlfriend's been a really good inspiration for me to do that. And we've done this thing where we write ourselves a letter 1 month in the future and 1 year in the future, and just try and say what we've already achieved. And even if it doesn't happen, it's still nice to think positive in a world where we're kind of told everything that's wrong as opposed to everything that goes right, which is good. And the realistic expectation of things take time, things don't happen overnight. So it's quite useful. As I'm finding out with this podcast, to my 10 listeners, it's great.
Hey, well, now it's 11. You got 11 now. So slow and steady.
Wonderful. I don't know if you want to share about your own business work or anything else you want to kind of, where people can find you or talk to you, or if anyone wants to kind of get in touch and ask you questions directly.
Yeah, sure. The website is Heartcast Media, like heart, like your beating heart, and like podcast, Heartcast Media. And, you can see all our services there, and there's a contact form. And then, of course, people can find me on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. Content's a little different, but I'm always happy to answer people's questions, especially women that are thinking about moving abroad, But hit me up anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions or be useful.
Well, thank you so much. And I've really enjoyed your view on life. It's been quite refreshing to see someone who's, after such a horrible start, perhaps you've really embraced it, which hasn't really hindered you, I don't think, which is wonderful. Probably improved your experience because you've been that more, I guess, real or mindful of what's going on, attentive, which is great. So thank you. And as always, if you have enjoyed the podcast, please do give it a subscribe. Please do share with your friends. And as always, we'll see you next time for the Expat Pod.